back. All In with Bryan Weatherford here. Glad you're with us today. And before we get started with our guests, quick question. You like to eat? Of course you like to eat. Who doesn't like to eat? Well, some of us like to eat more than others. That's a whole other story for another show. But let me tell you this much. If it wasn't for our farmers, none of us would be eating. And they've been doing it a long time, a lot of time for generations. So we have a guest in the studio here today. He is not a farmer himself, but he has a really unique opportunity for possibly for you and all of us to help out farmers and help yourself at the same time. His name is Chris Rawley, our guest. He's the CEO for Harvest Returns. Chris, welcome to the show today. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Bryan. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm glad to have you here, and I appreciated you chatting with me before we got on today because I got to learn that you're a 28-year Navy man. Still with the reserves today.
I am, yes.
Well, thank you so much for all of that, because if it wasn't for you and other people like that, I wouldn't be here to eat the stuff the farmers make. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. So how do we transition? We're a Navy guy, but we get working in with farmers. And as I mentioned, you didn't grow up in a farmer's life. So how did you get into what you're doing now?
No, I grew up in North Dallas suburbs, but I had the amazing opportunity to travel all over the world with the Navy. Mm-hmm. And during those travels, one thing that I began to appreciate and learn was that people in other countries, especially those war-torn and poverty-stricken countries, they don't take their food for granted like we do here, or at least like we did before the supermarket shelves started empty during COVID.
Right.
But they're a lot closer to how their food's produced. They care about who produces it and what's in it. Whereas I know that when I grew up, I ate whatever my mother put in front of me, and
same here.
That's changing now very rapidly.
Well, diets are changing, and it seems like every day there's a new allergy popping up that wasn't around when I was a kid. I have my own opinions on that. I'm not going to share them on the show today, but same thing. So the farmers, it's a big chess match. You got to stay ahead of the game in a very expensive way to try to figure out what the market dictates.
That's right. And so with this appreciation that I had with agriculture back in 2016, I reached out to a friend of mine, Austin Manis, who's also a military veteran, and we started up the company Harvest Returns. And originally we started it with the effort to bring investors in who had never invested in this type of asset before, because I wanted to invest in a farm before I started the company, and it turns out it's pretty hard to do. It takes a lot of capital, takes a lot of knowledge and know-how and connections, and most people just don't have that, but they may want to get into this asset class, farming. And so at the same time, there was new ways to set up investments with these online investing platforms. So the idea was to smash together investing online with farming and bring together farmers who need capital, equity or debt, with investors who want to try to support the food
that's
system.
the first thing I was thinking about, because you're in a unique position that a lot of companies aren't. A lot of companies are on one side or the other. Mm-hmm. You're on both sides. You need to find farmers that are looking for someone to invest in them, but you're also looking for investors that are looking for places to invest. So you got to wear a lot of hats, don't you?
That's right. It's a fun. We love talking to farmers and we love talking to investors, and it's two very different audiences. And fortunately, my partner Austin Manis grew up, spent his summers on his family farms in Southeast United States. So he's very in touch with the farmers, and I spend most of my time talking to investors, although we kind of overlap in many ways.
You know, we touched on it briefly, but when you're talking about agriculture, things are just changing all the time. We talk about the diets and stuff, but the technology as well. You know, there's always stuff, and I don't know a lot about farming, but I've read a little bit. And did I read properly that nowadays there's actually indoor farms?
That's right. We were just in Dallas the other day visiting with one of the indoor farmers who we raised some money for. And hydroponics and aquaponics and greenhouses. And the thing that's really driving that, well, there's actually a couple things. One is people want to know where their food comes from and who produces it and how it's produced. And there's a big drive for locally produced food. So most of the, say, leafy greens we eat is produced in Salinas Valley, California, and a couple places in Arizona. And during COVID, we found out that trucks don't always run the way they're supposed to, and the supermarket shelves can empty. So what we're seeing is more and more people want to grow their food locally, which is kind of back to the future. That's the way it all used to happen 150 years ago and beyond. You grew food in your backyard or your neighbor's yard and at the local farmer's market, and we're seeing more and more of that with this indoor agriculture and the high-tech, very automated systems to produce food. Not only are you producing food that's requires less water and less fertilizer and things like that. It can be produced year round in climates where you normally wouldn't produce it. So that's makes it a profitable investment.
Well, COVID has shown us so many things. One of the big ones, which you touched on, is you never know which link in the food chain is going to break next. And something like this comes in and breaks all of them. So it makes total sense that everything's old is new again, and you bring it on back down to have locally produced food with locally farmers, even indoors, outdoors, whatever it may be. All right, let's switch to the investor side. Give me a couple of reasons. What's in it for me? If I decide to invest in agriculture, why would I want to do that?
Well, there are a couple of reasons. One is the demographics of agriculture is very impressive. Like you said, everyone has to eat.
Sure.
It's the one industry that pretty much touches everybody on the planet.
Yep.
So the population continues to grow. More mouths to feed as populations around the world get more wealthy, which they do. They consume more protein, which takes more agricultural production. So the demographics is one. The second reason is because look at the stock market on any given day, especially after COVID. It's our stock market portfolios are bouncing up and down. In agriculture, it doesn't matter what the news says. It doesn't matter what COVID says. It doesn't matter what the stock market's doing. Crops are going to continue to grow, and people are going to continue to eat. So from a diversification standpoint, if you want to hedge your portfolio against all this extreme market volatility, agriculture is a good place to be. And I'd say the final reason is just because the gains are actually pretty appealing.
Are they?
If you look at long term, just take one piece of agriculture, U.S. farmland has grown steadily and actually beat the returns of like the S&P 500 and some other investments.
Well, that consistency is so important, and I'm not a big stock guy, go figure, but I do know this much. It's important to be able to diversify your portfolio. So this is just a whole new chapter that maybe a lot of people, till you came along, quite frankly, didn't even have the opportunity to do it.
That's right. Pension funds and university endowments and these big institutions, they've been investing in farmland for decades and decades. But if you were mom and pop investor or individual investor, there weren't a whole lot of ways to do it. So our platform enables people to come in and invest with not a whole lot of money, and we're working on different ways to diversify that so that people can come in with much smaller minimum investments.
And get in there. It's like Bitcoin you can eat. No, I'm joking. It's not exactly like
that. But not as crazy volatility. Yeah.
So how do you go about finding investors? Just from people you can't be just from people you know. There's got to be queen bees that can get you into bigger groups.
So we have a pretty strong online presence, and investors find us.
Nice.
They're looking for different ways to diversify, or they want to invest in farming is a common search term that people find us on, and we do lots of media and things like this that will attract investors to us.
Are there international opportunities here as well?
There are. I mean, in the big scheme of things, most of the opportunities are international. Now, for us, that's a lot harder to do because, especially in the age of COVID, where travel is limited. But we have done some foreign farms.
Well, I would think. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, there's farmers all over the world.
Right.
At various products. And a lot of times you got to going back to that food chain thing. Your expenses of getting the product from point A to point B might offset any profits you're going to make because you're having to spend it elsewhere as fuel costs increase and blah, blah, blah.
I mean, if you go into any given grocery store and want organic produce, chances are you're going to look at a label and it was not produced here in the United States.
Interesting.
So there's a big demand for that, and that's a growing field, and we're helping more and more farmers try to produce that organic.
Maybe they're doing it indoors.
A lot of times that's what's going on, yes.
Because you never know. Golly, technology is I think technology is here to stay. You can quote me on that one because it doesn't matter what the industry is. It's something's always going. But it's guys like you and your partner that are able to seize an opportunity, and it's not really just an opportunity. Yes, it is an opportunity. You want to make money, but it's also something that is so basic to just helping people. But helping people that are in an industry, farming, that's been around helping all of us for generation after generation after generation. I applaud you guys at Harvest Returns for what you've come up with. Continued success. We got to roll now. I appreciate you coming in the studio with us today. Thank you so much for that. Folks, thank you for being here with us as well. We're going to be right back here in just a little bit on All In. Take care.